In July 2025, Donald J. Trump made headlines again, this time not for a campaign rally or legal battle, but for his decision to ban journalists from the Wall Street Journal from accompanying him on his high-profile trip to Scotland. The move sent ripples through both political and media circles. Trump's team claimed the ban was a direct response to what they described as a slanderous and completely fake article published by the WSJ, which allegedly tied him to Jeffrey Epstein through a handwritten letter and drawings found in the financier's estate. According to the WSJ's investigative report, a letter with Trump's name in stylized annotations, alongside a cartoonish sketch, was allegedly discovered among Epstein's belongings during a court-authorized search. While the piece never definitively stated that Trump had written the letter or that he had any criminal connection, the implication, as interpreted by Trump and his allies, was damaging enough. The article opened the door to speculation and renewed scrutiny of Trump's long-denied ties to Epstein. In a fiery Truth Social post, Trump declared the report a coordinated smear and accused the WSJ of pushing deep state propaganda. He announced that the outlet's reporters would be barred from boarding Air Trump One and would not be included in the official press pool during his diplomatic stop in Aberdeen, where he was set to attend a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new hotel wing. This act wasn't just symbolic, it struck at the heart of press freedom. Critics, including journalists and legal scholars, condemned the decision, citing its chilling effect on investigative reporting. The White House Correspondents Association quickly released a statement expressing grave concern over Trump's retaliation, warning that barring critical outlets is a dangerous precedent in a democratic society. Supporters of Trump, however, applauded the move. Fake news deserves real consequences, one user posted on X, formerly Twitter. For them, this was Trump the warrior, standing up against an establishment media that had, in their view, been unfairly targeting him for years. But the story didn't end there. Behind the spectacle was something far more enduring and unsettling: the shadow of Jeffrey Epstein. Is it ever justified for a political figure to ban journalists based on negative coverage? Does this case represent censorship, or is it a defense against misinformation? What impact does this kind of public retaliation have on freedom of the press? To fully understand the weight of this controversy, we need to step back and examine the dark figure whose name continues to cast a shadow over American elites: Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein was a financier and convicted sex offender whose connections stretch from Wall Street to Buckingham Palace, from Hollywood moguls to U.S. presidents. His life ended in a Manhattan jail cell in August 2019, officially ruled a suicide, though conspiracy theories still swirl around the true circumstances of his death. But Epstein's legacy lives on, not in admiration, but in infamy. His story continues to implicate, haunt, and divide. Born in Brooklyn, Epstein rose through the financial ranks with surprising ease, despite lacking a college degree. He worked for Bear Stearns in the 1980s, eventually founding his own investment firm, catering only to clients worth hundreds of millions. But it was his private life that would later draw the attention of authorities. Epstein cultivated a network of power, inviting celebrities, academics, politicians, and royalty to his luxurious properties, most notably his private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, known to some as Pedophile Island. It was there, according to dozens of witnesses, that underage girls were trafficked, abused, and silenced. The criminal case against Epstein grew slowly and painfully. Despite substantial allegations, he avoided serious punishment for years. In 2008, he reached a controversial plea deal in Florida that allowed him to serve just 13 months in a work release program, despite being charged with multiple counts involving minors. The deal was brokered by then U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta, who would later serve in Trump's cabinet as Secretary of Labor, only to resign when the deal was exposed by the media. When Epstein was arrested again in 2019, authorities found thousands of photos, ledgers, videos, and personal correspondence. Among these materials, investigators hoped to find names, people complicit in his crimes, or at the very least, knowingly adjacent. That hope persists, and so does the speculation. The discovery of any material bearing Trump's name in Epstein's estate, no matter how circumstantial or innocent, is guaranteed to spark a firestorm. From a strategic standpoint, Trump's decision to ban the WSJ raises several questions. Was this purely damage control, or did it cross the line into censorship? Trump has a long history of branding news outlets as fake news, particularly those critical of him. CNN, the New York Times, and MSNBC have all been frequent targets of his public ire. What makes this case unique is the timing and target. The Wall Street Journal is traditionally conservative-leaning and not typically associated with sensationalism. Their decision to publish the Epstein-related content suggests that the editorial board found the material not only credible, but of significant public interest. For Trump, the consequences are multi-layered. On one hand, he's able to rally his base by framing himself as a victim of elite media manipulation. On the other, this move risks alienating moderate conservatives and drawing fresh attention to old and murky associations. His legal team immediately filed a $10 billion lawsuit against the WSJ, News Corp, and the reporters involved, alleging defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. While most legal analysts doubt the case will succeed in court, journalistic protections in the U.S. are strong. This isn't really about winning in court. It's about dominating the news cycle. In effect, Trump has recentered the conversation around himself, forcing both his critics and supporters to choose sides in yet another media battle. The Epstein connection, regardless of merit, now becomes secondary to the spectacle. Is Trump exploiting the Epstein story to energize his base, or is he genuinely trying to protect his reputation? Does suing a media outlet discourage real journalism, or does it enforce higher standards? Should we be more skeptical of articles that implicate public figures based on partial evidence? As news of Trump's retaliatory action against the Wall Street Journal spread, the public reaction was anything but monolithic. On one side, free press advocates condemned the move as a direct threat to journalistic independence. On the other, Trump loyalists celebrated what they saw as another powerful strike against mainstream media corruption. Social platforms like X, Threads, and TikTok lit up with takes from across the political spectrum. Major media figures, including prominent anchors from CNN, PBS, and even Fox News, voiced concerns. "This is a test of our national resolve," said one MSNBC host, adding, "If the press is punished for holding the powerful accountable, democracy itself is weakened." Editorials in newspapers across the country echoed that sentiment. Even the National Review, a conservative-leaning outlet often sympathetic to Trump, criticized the ban as deeply troubling, noting that it showed signs of autocratic impulse rather than measured leadership. Still, for millions of Trump supporters, the WSJ article was just the latest chapter in what they believe is an ongoing witch hunt. In Facebook groups and YouTube live streams, supporters reference past controversies, Russiagate, the Ukraine call, January 6th, and frame this as part of a long-standing conspiracy to destroy Trump's political future. To them, the article wasn't journalism, it was election interference in disguise. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal stood its ground. In an official statement, the editors defended the report, emphasizing that it had undergone rigorous fact-checking and was based on legally obtained evidence from the Epstein estate. They acknowledged that the material did not prove any direct wrongdoing by Trump, but argued that the public had a right to know if the name of a former and potentially future president appeared in Epstein-related files. Behind closed doors, other media outlets wrestled with a new dilemma. Should they dig deeper into the Epstein files now that Trump had made the story front-page news again? Or should they back off to avoid being targeted? Some networks chose the former. NBC and The Guardian announced follow-up investigations, saying that public interest in the case had never truly gone away, and that Trump's reaction had only made it more urgent. The public's growing demand for transparency led to calls for declassification of Epstein-related documents, including names, flight logs, and correspondence. Activists argued that this wasn't just about Trump. It was about systemic abuse, elite protection, and justice delayed. At the same time, conspiracy theories flourished. The internet exploded with dubious claims about hidden files, secret videos, and even suggestions that Epstein was still alive. In that noise, many serious discussions got drowned out. What began as a sober journalistic investigation was at risk of being consumed by the chaos of viral speculation. Trump's lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal, filed just 2 days after the article was published, is not merely a PR stunt, it's a high-stakes legal maneuver. The $10 billion defamation case names not just the newspaper itself, but also Rupert Murdoch, the media mogul who controls News Corp, WSJ's parent company, and the 2 investigative reporters who authored the piece. At its core, the lawsuit alleges intentional defamation, claiming the article was published with actual malice, a critical legal threshold under U.S. law when suing public figures. According to the 1964 Supreme Court ruling in New York Times v. Sullivan, a public figure can only win a defamation case if they can prove the journalist knowingly published false information or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. That's a very high bar to meet. Legal experts have been quick to point out that the WSJ, with its strong legal team and editorial safeguards, is likely well within its rights. The article was careful not to make direct accusations, relying instead on court-authorized findings and expert analysis of materials found in Epstein's home. If anything, the lawsuit seems to serve more as a tactic of intimidation, designed to drain resources and time from the journalists involved, and send a chilling message to others. But Trump's lawyers have argued that the damage was already done. In the court of public opinion, one attorney stated, "You don't need an accusation, you just need an implication." They claim that the WSJ used suggestive framing and selective sourcing to create a false narrative linking Trump to one of the most reviled criminals in recent American memory. For the journalists named in the lawsuit, the stakes are personal and professional. While their employer has vowed to support them, history shows that protracted legal battles can end careers, ruin reputations, and discourage future reporting on sensitive subjects. The tactic is sometimes referred to as a slap suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation, a lawsuit intended not to win, but to silence. Several media rights organizations, including the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press and PEN America, have already denounced the lawsuit, calling it an attack on First Amendment rights. If this case succeed, wrote one editorial, it would mark a turning point in the ability of journalists to report freely on people in power. But beyond the legal complexities, a broader question looms. What is the role of journalism in holding elites accountable when those same elites can marshal vast legal and financial resources against the press? There's also the troubling trend of information asymmetry. When billionaires can sue, ban, and blacklist news organizations, it distorts the democratic ideal of a free and fair press. If nothing else, Trump's lawsuit underscores the fragility of truth in the age of weaponized litigation. From the very start of his political ascent, Donald Trump has treated the media not just as a mirror, but as a battlefield. He doesn't simply react to coverage, he actively transforms the coverage into a weapon, a narrative he can control and manipulate to serve his own messaging. The situation with the Wall Street Journal is just the latest iteration of a tactic that has long defined Trump's strategy, reframing journalism as aggression and himself as its victim. By banning the WSJ from his Scotland press pool, Trump accomplished several objectives at once. First, he signaled strength to his base, demonstrating that he is still willing to punch back at institutions that challenge him. Second, he shifted the narrative. Instead of the story being about the contents of Epstein's estate, it became about media bias, betrayal, and elite corruption. And third, he baited the press into amplifying his outrage, creating a feedback loop that kept his name in headlines and the WSJ on the defensive. This is what many political analysts now call the Trump playbook. Turn any negative story into proof of persecution and use the controversy to deepen political loyalty. But it's more than just a playbook. It's a philosophy of communication rooted in confrontation, not persuasion. For Trump, media is not a neutral observer. It's an adversary to be discredited or dominated. It's worth noting that this approach has worked over and over again. Trump's approval among core Republican voters has remained remarkably stable, even amid impeachment, indictments, and multiple civil cases. Why? Because for many Americans, the media is no longer seen as an institution of truth, but rather as an instrument of agenda. Trump exploits this distrust with expert precision, and when the name Epstein enters the conversation, the stakes rise exponentially. Conspiracy theories abound. The general public knows enough to be disturbed, but not enough to feel fully informed. Into that gap steps Trump, ready to reframe, redirect, and rebrand every uncomfortable detail into political ammunition. In the end, the actual question, what is the truth about Trump and Epstein, is not what drives the news cycle. The media war is the story. The legal case becomes theater, and the electorate is left choosing sides, not sorting facts. The name Jeffrey Epstein no longer simply refers to a man, it refers to a system of protection, silence, and untouchable power. Though Epstein is dead, the machinery that allowed him to operate for decades remains largely intact, and that is perhaps the most unsettling reality of all. Despite hundreds of documents, testimonies, and photographs made public, the most critical questions remain unanswered. Who enabled Epstein's trafficking operation? Who knew and did nothing? Who participated and still walks free? These questions hang in the air like a cloud that refuses to dissipate. While figures like Ghislaine Maxwell have faced consequences, the wider network remains veiled behind sealed court documents, non-disclosure agreements, and powerful lawyers. In this context, even the faintest association with Epstein becomes explosively political. Whether it's Prince Andrew, Bill Gates, or Donald Trump, the mere mention of their name in Epstein's orbit can trigger outrage, speculation, and mistrust. And that's part of what makes the WSJ's article so volatile. It didn't accuse Trump of a crime, it merely placed him near the fire, and that was enough to ignite a public bonfire. The broader tragedy is that the Epstein case was never just about one man. It was about a culture of secrecy among the elite, a culture where money could erase guilt, where influence silenced victims, and where criminal networks could flourish within plain sight. Many survivors of Epstein's abuse have spoken out, but few have seen real justice. Some fear retaliation. Others have been drowned out by louder political voices using their trauma for rhetorical gain. What began as a demand for accountability has slowly become a circus of spin. And so, with each new headline, whether it's a letter found in Epstein's safe or a lawsuit from a former president, we are reminded of how far we still are from closure. Not just for the victims, but for a society that allowed this to happen. The clash between Trump and the Wall Street Journal brings us to an uncomfortable truth about journalism today. The cost of speaking truth to power has never been higher. Journalists face lawsuits, bans, threats, and character assassination, not just from foreign dictatorships, but from elected leaders in democratic societies. Investigative reporting, especially on sensitive topics like Epstein, has become a dangerous occupation. Even prestigious newsrooms now calculate risk differently. Is this story worth the lawsuit, the backlash, the loss of access? That is not how journalism should work. But Trump's lawsuit against the WSJ and his public targeting of specific journalists has accelerated a larger trend: self-censorship in the name of survival. Some reporters are walking away from explosive stories altogether. Others are forced to bury key facts in legal footnotes and euphemisms. The chilling effect is real and growing. At the same time, audiences are becoming more polarized. Readers seek confirmation, not information. Algorithms feed people stories they already agree with. Trust in mainstream media has eroded dramatically, especially among older conservatives and younger progressives alike. In that vacuum of trust, bad actors thrive. Independent journalism must